have different owners and have different ownership. So it's mapped as parkland, but the individual parcels are in different phases of acquisition by the city and then development. So I'm happy to go through the parcels one by one. I got a nod.
I want to, well, okay.
Okay, so you may have seen that there's a soccer field that kids are running around on between North 9th to North 10th, and that's also in construction for shoreline access, for a building that will have community meeting space and other facilities in it. Next to that is city storage, and the city has not acquired that portion yet. There's another lot, it's about half a block, and that's between, we call it 50 Kent. It's right next to city storage. It's sort of the Kent Avenue portion. It looks like a parking lot. The city has acquired that. It's gone through remediation testing, and it's going through additional remediation planning and getting the permits to do the remediation. We expect that to start in the fall of 2012.
Which lot is it? I'm sorry.
That's, it looks like an asphalt lot, chain link, about half a block. It's between, let's see, North 9th, North 10th. Between 11th and 12th. I'm sorry?
All those trucks are stored, the trailers like that?
Yes,
The oil company?
well, it's got a lot of Parks vehicles on it right now. And then just north of that, we have Bayside Fuel. And this was actually pretty astounding. We had a huge citywide, statewide, federal fiscal challenges. And despite that, we've gone forward and signed an acquisition deal. It's a 5-year deal. It was signed last year. The first payment was made on this acquisition to acquire the Bayside Fuel property for parkland development. So that's a pretty heavy lift, and I'm delighted.
What cross street is that?
That would be...
Because my problem is that none of this is actually in Greenpoint, and if it seems like a mere technicality, it still is like a good quarter-mile difference as far as people's, you know, and it's also just a different neighborhood. So I feel like why is it coming from the Williamsburg, direction north and not in some cases coming, there are obviously transfer parking and other things, but the actual Bushwick Inlet, which there's nothing on it that has to be removed. I'm sure that there's a lot of work that has to be done, but
right. So the next two pieces of property on the Bushwick Inlet, one is the Motiva site, and that has not been acquired. The other is the Monitor. It's now owned by locals who want to build a museum there, and I think that that's contentious. There are people in the neighborhood who, fully support that, and I don't know that they would be happy to see the city do anything. So that's the situation. That's the status of those things. Transmitter Park, as you mentioned, between Greenpoint and Kent, is in construction. That will open in 2012. And Manhattan Avenue Kayak Launch, which has been in construction for a number of years, was opened probably, was that last year or 2 years? Last year, 2 years ago. So your question was, why is there's so much more parkland slated or planned towards Williamsburg rather than Greenpoint? Is that the question?
well, partly that, but it's more particularly, and I'm sorry to put in, but but and I understand that there's this contentious issue with the Bushwick Inlet, and I don't understand the prehistory of it because maybe I wasn't at the meetings where there was a fight between the city and the owners of that property, but maybe other people know and can fill in.
I'm sorry, which property?
Well,
Bayside or Monitor or
Bushwick, the actual inlet I'm talking about.
okay.
Dave, a lot of what you're talking about goes back to the rezoning of
Correct.
05. The rezoning of 05. That is when the city mapped all this land that she's speaking of from North 9th to North 15th as parkland. Because essentially that's what Williamsburg demanded when they did the 197A plan throughout the 90s, and which was ratified in 02. And during that whole long process of doing these 197A plans. It was initially one plan for Williamsburg Greenpoint. It became two plans when they realized that they had competing needs and desires for all the land that got rezoned. So I think the answer to that question goes back to the desires of the two neighborhoods for what they wanted with regards to the replanning the neighborhood for the future.
Okay,
What became the 197A.
But then there's a separate thing, which maybe you guys were involved in this discussions about, but and this is again, it's like maybe a different, slightly different agenda from the bring to light exactly. But since we're talking about the issues, and we're trying to access immediately areas that can become public spaces, there is this property that is owned by a nonprofit corporation. It's not complicated to access the Monterey Museum site. It's not negotiating with an oil company. It's just
The Monitor Museum folk
I don't think they
have
want
the
to.
rights to it, and they determine what happens there, and the plans that they have plans, and
But it seems that from what I gather, that the conflict between the city and the owners of this property are preventing the city from moving forward on the other portion of the property that
No.
it doesn't.
the other
Well,
portions of the
there-
property have to deal with acquiring, which is expensive, some of which is done, and then even once all the parcels are acquired, they still have to go and undergo remediation. And as far as timeline, if you think about the piece that the city did acquire, the Bayside fuel site, that's on a 5-year purchase plan. Okay, so the first payment was made last year. It'll be another 4 years of payments, and then it'll go about 5 years possibly of environmental remediation. This used to be a coal manufactured gas plant. So that's before anything is built, and there is no, from what I understand,
Right.
any money in there actually to build it. So that's the one piece that's actually acquired. Motiva piece, which rims around the inlet, has not been acquired, and that could be acquired fairly cheaply, but again, there's remediation involved. And by cheaply, I mean $4 or $5 some odd million.
But
Who knows? And then, if you're going back another property down, there is the Norm Brodsky City Storage Site, which they want about 200 some odd million dollars, and the city's saying we just aren't going to do that. And that's back and forth, and we are insisting that the city has a responsibility to acquire these properties because they said they would. Now again, even if they did acquire it, they would probably do it on another payment plan, and they would still have to do the remediation afterwards.
But anyway,
And then
We don't have to get-
the monitor site is owned by this nonprofit group,
right.
and the city has no interest in doing anything there, really.
So, well, I want to clarify that just because it's coming up constantly in my conversations with them and trying to access it. And I'm sorry, I could talk about this on the phone and clarify it for me too, but maybe it's just as well to have other people understand. The owners of the Modern Museum site believe that the city intends to use eminent domain to take possession of that property. Is that not the case? Because the conceptual plans for that park include that site. And if it's not true, then can we get a letter from the city saying we don't intend to take that property so that they are free to use it?
I mean, I don't know whether or not the city intends to do it. My understanding is that they're not going to touch any of it. They're going to go in order of from south to north. I don't think that they are paying attention to the property right now and have any plans to take it whatsoever. But that's not a letter. That's not a guarantee from the mayor's office. And this mayor won't be around at the later on anyway. He's not taking it in the next 2 years, and we've heard nothing to the effect that he has any plans on taking it from domain. Am I wrong? Yes.
Frankly, the city, you look at Bayside Fuel, it was a negotiated acquisition. And it may have started as an eminent domain proceeding, but ultimately it moved to a negotiated acquisition. It's far cheaper for the city to sit down and talk to somebody and try to reach agreement about what a fair purchase price is or what they'd like out of being purchased than to go in by eminent domain. So eminent domain is not the city's first choice. I think that way beyond the scope of Rami and me. You're talking about the city law department, the mayor's office, and other people. But frankly, I would agree with Rami in saying that, you know, there's no budget to do anything about such actions that you've mentioned in this mayor's term.
And it could be that the reason that the Williamsburg developed first is because they have all those high rises and condos that developed, they have high tax rateable to the city's pulling in money. In Greenpoint, they don't have that. They don't have the tax income to spend on it for us.
It's,
I just want to say, I'm Emily Gallagher. I'm the co-chair of Neighbors Allied for Good Growth. And one of our long-term pushes is to help pressure the city into gaining these pieces of land. And it's a long process, but what Rami and what Stephanie have been saying about this really being a mayor's office issue is really important, because the mayor is going to be done after this. So if people are really passionately interested in helping to gain these parcels of land, we could use your help. And I do have cards with me about our group. But I also had another thought. I can't remember it now, but I'll come back to it. But
I guess I'd be interested in shifting the conversation a little bit out of not just ownership, but use. On some level, like as Transmitter opens next year, like I'm interested, because we're just people who, we don't own any of this land. We get the permission from the people, whether it be the city or the private people or whatever, and do something there that's free and public. And so I guess I'm inspired by how that more people can do things, and so as Transmitter opens, could there be new ways that space is used? Could it be host events that that's similar to what we do in other ways? That's what's interesting me right now, and I don't know if we can talk more about the use of the waterfront more than. I don't know how do people imagine that park? I don't know if there are plans exactly for how that would be